Right, hi everyone, my name's Stephen J. Humphrey, independent candidate for Bournemouth East when eventually Gordon Brown gives us an election. Right, following on from my late night thing last night, thought I'd wake up and be a bit more positive. Right, so the problem is we can't trust the government. So how do we put in place mechanisms to prove that we can trust the government? How do we change Parliament so that it becomes truly representative? I mean, if 10 of us sign a petition to stop Trident, for example, what's the mechanism to prove that A, the government got that petition, and B, are going to take their concerns on board? What mechanism? What evidence do we have as people to prove that the government are listening? And then thirdly, how do we prevent a fascist state from taking over? Like the Lisbon Treaty got voted down 18 months ago, and then last month it got voted in, or beginning of this month, wasn't it? And then how do we know the Lisbon Treaty is free and fair? How do we know that it's not about corporate backroom deals? How do we know? How do we question authority if we suspect authority is corrupt? How do we develop the systems to prove that government is a good government? How? That's what I'd like to ask. And develop a new system, or adapt an old system if there's one that I haven't found yet, to prove that we can trust government, that we can prove that government is working for our best interest. How do we the people determine that government is a good government? I mean, we can go to the National Audit Office online and check their records, but they don't really ask the question, how do we trust the government? How do we prove it? How do we determine that we're actually telling the truth? Unless we go to court, unless we prosecute Gordon Brown for war crimes, how do we know that he hasn't committed war crimes? Because Gordon Brown says he hasn't committed war crimes. Well, that's no defence. If I went to court for car stealing, the coppers have my fingerprints on the steering wheel. They may have CCTV footage of me breaking into a car, and they've got further evidence to prove that I stole the car. But how do we prove that Gordon Brown is not a war criminal, hasn't committed war crimes, hasn't committed crimes against humanity? Because it hasn't been to the European Court of Human Rights. Well, but by the time it gets to the European Court of Human Rights, I reckon it's too late. We should know before we make the allegations if we can prove it or not. And I reckon we can prove it, because there's 500,000 Iraqi kids dead now as a direct result of George W. Bush and Tony Blair and Dick Cheney. 500,000 kids dead in Iraq because they launched a war against Saddam Hussein. Only it wasn't against Saddam Hussein, even though he ended up losing his life. It was against the Iraqi people. Now that's a war crime. That is a crime against humanity. That's a crime against the Iraqi people. Now, if the allegations of the people who have lost family members in the Iraq war can't prove that Gordon Brown is not a war criminal, how do we change it? If we can't go to court and prove an allegation or disprove an allegation, how do we prove the government is a good government? How? I know you can say, you can find an excuse to divide and conquer, but can you find an excuse to unify against a common message? Can we unite behind the common call for justice for the Iraqi people? Can we call Gordon Brown to account for his actions? Can we call Tony Blair, George W. Bush? Now, in my way of thinking, if they're public servants, there should be a mechanism in place, at whatever level of government you think is relevant, to call that government to account. Now, the way we've done it for 200-300 years is every 4 or 5 years we have a general election. I mean, government was in power, took over power in 1939 and stayed there until 1945. Now that's 6 years. What if they don't call a general election between now and next May? We're stuck. The biggest weakness of British democracy is the fact that Gordon Brown is the only person in the entire universe who can call a general election. The only person. I can't. You can't. None of us can call a general election, only Gordon Brown. Not even Parliament. I mean, Gordon Brown earlier this year was, David Cameron was had a really big bust up with Gordon Brown at PMQs a couple of months ago. He said, we can't trust your competence. We can't prove, we've got no confidence in your leadership, Gordon Brown. And that's basically a quote from David Cameron. Now, that was 4 months ago, before they all went on holiday. And nothing happened. We didn't get a general election in May. Now, why was that? Because it's all in the discretion of Gordon Brown. They've fixed the rules so that only Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, can call a general election. Now, if 10 MPs got off their arse and wrote a letter of calling for a vote of confidence in a corporate board of directors, the chairman they'd have to vote. Now, if the government is UK PLC, a corporate entity, then there should be a mechanism in place to kick these idiots out, to kick Gordon Brown out, to kick David Cameron out if his electorate don't want to be led by a Tory government. Well, there should be 10 votes. Or how about this for an idea? We appoint a chairman, we get 12 people of good standing, and then we hold a court of justice to prove the argument against Gordon Brown. And like the British Constitution Group have planned for the end of October, down to the last minute, but where we put the government on trial, and the British Constitutional Group are putting the government on trial end of this month, 2 weeks, and I'm hoping to go there myself. And just Google British Constitutional Group Conference, October 31st, Euston Road, London, and get there Saturday. You've got no excuse, it's a Saturday. Take the morning off and then go and give your evidence. I'll be there. Hopefully I'll be there with this camera so you can do a video blog if we can. There must be a mechanism. It must be. Anyway, that's my thoughts following on from last night. My name is Stephen J. Humphrey, independent candidate for Bournemouth East at the next general election, which could be, if 10 of us, it's not complex, it's perfectly simple, it's perfectly rational, and there is a way to fix it all. We just got to get together, unite, and find the way to do it. Right, that's it. My daily blog is, ciao.